Hello, hello. Welcome to this webinar on combining the 5 focusing steps and critical chain. Thank you for your considering it was worth your time to listen to me from all over the world. This time schedule here is chosen so that we have a lot of people from all over Europe, a lot of people from the American continent, from the south of South America to the north of Canada, and in Europe all over the place, from Iceland, and in fact, sorry, I forgot Africa, which is also very present. So welcome and thank you. I've been doing these webinars for a long time. I do find this one particularly exciting because you'll see, hence the astounding results in the title. It's not this kind of vocabulary I often use. I'm sort of the English understatement guy. But I have said they're astounding or incredible or unbelievable because they simply are. Regularly, I've been surprised when my clients are obtaining results above what I was expecting. And I'm going to be trying to explain why. And I also posted a little comment about this. This is interesting, of course, for people involved in the project portfolio world, because that's what we're going to be talking about, but it's also an interesting view on the theory of constraints in general, and you'll understand why. I mean, why is it that in this particular area, project management, that you can get these very, very strange, very rapid results? And I think I know why. So the format of the webinar is very simple: a brief introduction, and then a bit of theory or the principles of it, what do we mean by using the 5 focusing steps and critical chain simultaneously, and then some examples and a conclusion, followed by a questions and answer session. Okay, so the presentation will be 60 minutes long and 30 minutes of questions and answers. In fact, there are 2 of us. I have a co-pilot. I'm speaking to you, but Leo is standing by. And if you use the chat function to type in your remarks or questions, he will be reading them, not me. Okay. Or rather the Q&A feature rather than the chat function, but you can use both, in fact. And he's going to digest all the questions that are coming up so that he can host the questions and answer session at the end. Okay. The presentation material can be downloaded from our website on the page that you use to register, and also it'll be directly proposed to you just at the end of the webinar. So when you click out of the webinar, normally you come back to the Marris Consulting page where you can download the PDF of all the slides. Okay, so here we go, and off we go. I'm Philip Marris. I'm a European British citizen for another month or 2. And I'm a horrible consultant. I'm bilingual French-English. I live in Paris. I started my operational excellence journey, in fact, by falling in love with what we call lean, the Toyota way, just in time as it was called. And a few years later, I was hired by Eliyahu Goldratt, the author of The Goal, founder of the theory of constraints and stuff, and developed a love of theory of constraints. So my professional life has been mixing those 2 things in particular and other bits and pieces of DDMRP, TRIZ, and whatever, to improve company performances. And I've done it all over the world. I'm counting, I think it's 272 times right now. I'm author of a very boring book in French on applying the theory of constraints in manufacturing, subtitle, if you like the goal, this is how you do it, because the goal is a novel, not a textbook. And I founded Marris Consulting 15 years ago. Oops, that's got to the end. And there are 12 consultants. We're based in Paris, although we work all over the world. And we work a lot in operational excellence, manufacturing things, a lot in the project environment, and mixing in theory of constraints and lean. Okay. As I hope you know, we're very generous with our content, since, for instance, our YouTube channel has over 300 videos, and we try and add about well, the target is one a week, but when we're very busy, it comes to sort of 2 a month, I think. So have a look if you don't know about that. There are lots of videos about these subjects. Okay, and as I say, we work all over the world and in all kinds of industry, from handbags to rockets to hamburgers to toothpaste to aeroplanes, of course. Basically any physical product is we find interesting, and we find it very enriching to be able to work in so many different environments, in fact. Okay, so that's what the experience that underlies the presentation comes from all that. Okay, so what is what are we going to be talking about, right? Maybe the title should have been the 5 focusing steps and critical chain, but the basic idea is this. The theory of constraints, in case you learned about critical chain without knowing what the theory of constraints was, the theory of constraints contains critical chain, right? Critical chain is the theory of constraints solution to managing projects. And the goal, a novel, is nearly at 8 million copies sold in 32 languages today, and it's often one of the ways that people get to know about the theory of constraints, and therefore they often get that impression that, you know, the theory of constraints is all about manufacturing, since the goal is a novel based in a factory. Okay. And what is it all about? Well, I believe that the ideas and the goal are A, universal, B, they're getting more and more pertinent as the world gets more and more unstable and speeds up. Because take one of the foundations of managing a company, the annual budgets that no doubt you're starting to prepare now for next year, right? And forget the particular context of this year, which is even worse than other years. What you were doing, what you thought you were doing, or what you knew you had to do was to distribute the capacities and the capabilities in your organization equitably, so that everybody would have just the right amount of work. There'd be the right amount of people in accounting, the right amount of people in workshop D, there would be the right amount of people in engineering, the right amount of people in maintenance, and so forth, right? If you had too many people, you would cost too much. If you didn't have enough people, you wouldn't be able to meet your targets. Okay, and when you sign off that budget, you assume that you've done that, right? That you've distributed the work equitably in your organization. And well, that's just no longer possible, whatever your business, because basically the visibility in the world we have today has decreased significantly and will continue decreasing year by year. It'll just get worse and worse and worse. And yet the inertia that we have to put the right capabilities and capacities in the right place in one's organization haven't changed at that same speed, right? It still takes about the same amount of time to hire somebody and train them, or to buy a machine and install it. So it's just getting more and more impossible to get a budget right and have the right capacities everywhere, okay? So somewhere in the system, somebody's got the short straw. They have less capacity than the resources around them, okay? They are the constraint of the system, and they determine the performance of the system. That's the theory of constraints, okay? And once you've accepted that, then, well, you understanding that the constraint determines the entire performance, you'll find it, focus on it, exploit it better. That will improve the system performance. And you've got rules such that the 1 hour lost on the constraint is an hour lost for the system and stuff like that, okay? So that's the theory of constraints. A little later, after Elie Goldratt invented this stuff for factories, for manufacturing, he was concerned with the project management arena, and he came up with this thing called critical chain, okay, which is a strange beast with no alternative. You either fail your projects or you use critical chain. There's no other way of doing projects that succeed. That's why in the traditional environment, people start with a defeatist attitude to a project. And they say, okay, it's a project, therefore it's going to be late, it's going to cost too much, and we're going to be disappointed with the outcome, right? And critical chain blows all that away, because you can finish your projects fast, on time, within budget, within specific, and with all specifications and stuff, okay? Typically, average durations are reduced by 39%, and productivity or efficiency is increased by 50 to 100%, and all these sorts of strange things, and finishing all on time. Okay, so that sounds pretty impossible, of course, let's have a look at how it's done, right? First thing, please to understand is that in the portfolio and the project environment, there are simultaneously two dimensions, two types of constraints in the system. Okay, each individual project has a critical path, a sequence of events which will determine the duration of the project, right? And its close cousin is called the critical chain in the theory of constraints. It's the same as the critical path, except it takes into account resource dependencies. That's to say that it will notice that one person can't do two things at the same time, so it will take into account the dependencies between events and the availability of resources. That's the small difference between critical path and critical chain. Okay, so the constraint of an individual project is that critical chain. Okay, if you gain or lose a day on that critical chain, the project will gain or lose a day, right? So each project has a constraint, right? And that's dimension one. But as soon as we're in a portfolio environment, all those constraints are going through the organization, right? And as the projects go through, one of those departments, one of those resources is going to be the bottleneck of the organization, right? It's going to have more work than everybody else, and therefore it's going to determine what the organization can do as a whole. There will be a capacity constraint in the system. Okay, so you've got these projects going through the system, and they're going to go through the resources, and in those resources there's going to be a capacity constraint. Okay, and today we're going to talk about that second dimension of constraint, the capacity constraints in portfolios. Okay, it's important for a number of reasons. One of them is that to set up critical chain, it's not instantaneous. Depends on the organization, its project management maturity, and a number of things. Okay, but it's going to take weeks, if not months, before you actually get the thing started and you start getting the results. Okay, whereas if you apply what I'm going to be talking about today, the 5 focusing steps, you can do that immediately, right? Starting this evening, and you can get immediate results, and incredible immediate results, right? Such as multiplying by 2 or 3 the productivity and the throughput of your organization. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. How can you, using the 5 focusing steps, very quickly and very simply, increase the performance of your entire portfolio. Okay, so we won't be discussing all the details of critical chain in this webinar. Okay, there are, I believe, over 50 hours, 50 hours of videos that explain critical chain by us, or by our clients and stuff. In particular, if you want the short version, there's a 5-minute video. There are lots of conferences such as these that we've recorded in previous occasions. There's a series of 4 20-minute videos that takes you step by step into greater depth. And we also have a dedicated website on critical chain. Okay, so there's lots and lots of ways you can find out about the rest of critical chain. I'm going to concentrate on the 5 focusing steps today. All right. What are the 5 focusing steps? Okay, they are the tactic, the way you do continual improvement in the theory of constraints, right? And they've been around for a long, long time. This is the formal presentation of the 5 steps. The first thing you have to do, of course, is to identify the constraint, okay? And then you will exploit it, then you will subordinate it, then you will elevate it, and then you'll probably end up breaking that bottleneck, and you have to find the next one. Okay, let's just go through those a little bit more slowly. And I'm going to go through details of these steps in the following slides. The first thing to do is to identify the constraint, and that is more difficult in a project environment than it is in a physical factory environment for a number of reasons. But the idea is the same. The way to do it is the same. You need to find the longest queues of work, right? Because naturally, the work is going to pile up in front of the constraint. Okay, so once you've found it, you exploit it, right? And there are 2 things, 2 and 4, exploit, elevate, are close cousins. Exploit is what I can do immediately without wasting time and money, right? And as you'll see, there are a number of simple ways you can do this, and the main one is to make sure that the constraint, if it is a person, which is often the case in the project world, is not multitasking. Okay, so we'll look at the details of that. Then we in fact skip step 3 and 4, because what happens is that the exploit stage opens up so much extra capacity, makes it so much more efficient that immediately another bottleneck turns up. So you find the new bottleneck and you go back to step 1. So in fact, although it's called the 5 openness steps because that's where it came from, in this example, we're in fact doing 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5. It's high speed 5 focusing steps, right? You don't actually need to do step 3 and 4 because things are improving so fast that you don't have the time, right? And you just about 1, 2, 3, 4 times, depending on the company, go through the loop 1, 2, 5. Okay. Let's understand, and maybe this is one of the most important slides, and one for me which is important both for people in the project environment and the theory of constraints. Why is it possible to have these absolutely extraordinary results in this area? Okay, and I think the reason is quite simple. If you're doing the budgets of a manufacturing facility, right, you have the number of machines, you have the time per parts, you have data that's not, in fact, very good, but it's better than nothing. And so you're going to be able to do some calculations to work out, you know, do I need 1 shift or 2 shifts? Do I need to buy an extra machine and stuff? And the margin of error in doing that work is going to be not insignificant, but it's not going to be a huge mistake, right? You're going to get it approximately right. Okay, you're not going to have 6 machines when 1 machine would suffice. Okay, so you get that about right. But in the project world, all the data is wrong, especially all the data about how long it is going to take you to do this particular task, right? There's all this guessing work, you know. How long is it going to take you to have a good idea? How long is it going to design this, or to make this new prototype where you don't even know what the product looks like yet, and all that stuff? Okay, and so all the data is completely irrelevant in many ways. So how could you possibly get the right capacities in the right place? Well, you don't. Otherwise, what I'm going to show you wouldn't be possible. Okay, and so you can easily have, in fact, 3 or 4 or 10 times too much capacity in a particular department in the project environment, right? Because the data just doesn't show you that, right? Because the times that people are putting in for a task, in fact, the times they did last year, right? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It took me 10 hours to do that last year for this sort of thing, and so it's going to take me 10 hours next year, right? It's not true. Okay, otherwise what I'm going to show you wouldn't be possible, right? We get companies to do 2 times or 3 times more by just opening up the bottleneck, which means that the non-bottlenecks had 2 times or 3 times excess capacity, right? That's the wild, crazy thing about this. That's why it's exciting for the people who are involved, and it's, I think, an eye-opener for everybody who wants to try and understand the theory of constraints, right? In this environment, because the data is so wrong, the excess capacity on average throughout the company is huge, and therefore working in the way I'm going to show you gives these very, very strange results. Okay, so what kind of bottlenecks do we find? We find silly or regrettable bottlenecks often, okay, and nearly always not identified. You didn't know that you had it, and I'm going to try to explain to you where you can find it this evening or tomorrow morning, right? It's not rocket science. You just have to learn to see in the critical chain way, right? That's all. And so that will be surrounded by a few resources that have only 50% capacity, Okay, and then somewhere you've got a lot of excess capacity. That's what we're finding, right? Because the data was wrong, because you can't calculate how many people I needed in the drawing office, how many people did I need in the architectural thing, how many integrators did I need, how many, and so forth, right? You don't know. You're using data that's completely false and basically just a repeat of the previous year, right? And as I say, with the results you'll see coming up, that'll be the proof. I mean, the same people suddenly start doing 3 times more stuff than they used to do, right? Okay, so off we go. Step 1. You shall look for the longest queue. You should look for the longest queue. You should look for the longest queue. It's as simple as that. And I guess the only difference between those listening to me and myself in this area is I know the queue is there, and so I'll just keep looking for it until I find it. Whereas you, because you're not yet convinced that what I'm saying is the truth, and you think maybe in your company it doesn't happen or whatever, you're not certain that this phenomenon exists, right? But if you just keep that in mind, it must be there somewhere. You will find it, believe me. Okay, so you need to look at it, and the logo of the company, of course, is built on all this. If you can imagine your portfolio as things starting up here, going through your organization, right, whatever it is, the proof of concept, this design, that design, the prototype, the testing, the industrialization out the bottom and stuff, right? Somewhere, somebody's got less capacity than everybody else, okay? And because there's no proper management of the capacity of your organization, right? I mean, most top managers, when they're dealing with this kind of thing, they basically assume that to get the most out of the system, it's hydraulic pressure. That's to say, the more projects I put into the system, the more projects will come out of the system. When in fact, unfortunately, it's completely false. The whole thing goes mad and less comes out, as I will try to explain, mostly because of multitasking. Okay. So I know that some people say that that there are not always capacity constraints in project management. I don't know. We've been doing it a while in all sorts of environments. We're always finding a capacity constraint. Okay, and certainly, obviously, in new product development, because that's one of the new challenges of a lot of companies. New technology, new competitors, and so forth means that you have to put out new products more and more often. And that overloads completely the resources. So we are finding capacity constraints, big, nasty bottlenecks in portfolios every single time. Okay, and so you look for the highest level of work in progress. It should look something like this. That's to say, suddenly you go through a spot in your system, if you're walking yourself down the flow, where there was a lot of stuff, and suddenly just after it, there's less stuff. Okay. Watch out, you can have things piling up in this part of the organization as well, right? So you're going to have big queues up until the bottleneck, because everybody's basically going to slow down to the speed of the bottleneck and keep looking very busy with a desk full of stuff, right? Okay, so that's how you find it. I think it's important to understand that very often the bottlenecks we're finding were not identified. 80%, or right now we redid the statistics recently, and hopefully it's because of the videos that we've been putting out about this. About 3/4 of the people with whom we work implementing this are wrong about where their bottleneck is. Okay, so we find it's somewhere else, and because it was ignored, it's not being used properly. Yes, also why we get these very good results. Okay, so 1. Forget the workload calculations. I never look at them. Doesn't point you in the right direction at all. Okay. Forget the best actor in the company. I've got so much work. You must hire 5 more people and stuff. You know, he's just a good actor. It doesn't mean that there's more work in that department than the next one. On the contrary, we found regularly that these unfortunate bottlenecks are not known, not recognized, simply because the person in charge of that department has been there for a long time. He's a quiet guy. He doesn't like to scream and shout and stuff, and that's how he became a good bottleneck. You know, when we find them, we go and see them and say, "But I mean, do you realize that they were a bottleneck?" Yes, I know that. I've said that to my boss every year. I ask him, I think we should hire some more people because we really have too much work. Right? Don't forget the acting by everybody. That's probably going to point you in exactly the wrong direction. Okay. So unfortunate bottlenecks, you're going to see some examples. The other kind of bottlenecks we're finding, which is both dangerous and a gold mine, is one or two people with critical skills, right? The integrator, the guy who knows it all, who knows how to put all the bits of a complex object together, whether it's an aircraft control system or a water treatment plant or whatever. The person who is the big expert and is always being asked to validate or comment on this, that, and the other. Okay, easy to identify, 2 or 3 people running after him with papers to sign in down the corridors, and so forth. Right? If it's that, it's dangerous and critical because if that person has a problem, the whole organization does. And it's also a huge gold mine because if you look at those people, you find out that because they inherited all the contradictions and badness of your organization, they have a work hygiene that is ridiculous, and they're multitasking like mad, and they're only being about 10–20% efficient. Not because they're bad, but because they keep getting interrupted and torn between priorities and stuff. So you protect them from the madness of the organization, and they can produce 2 or 3 times more, and everybody else can. That's fine. Okay. In development of new products, it's easy for me to say, forgive me, but it's something that we see so often, and I will put it in this way. Watch out. Too many people are trying to develop tomorrow's products with yesterday's capabilities. Okay. And so you don't have enough electricians, you don't have enough software programmers, you don't have enough people knowledgeable in regulation, and so forth and so forth, right? It's unlikely to be in some of your old historical skill set. It's likely to be in the new stuff. Okay. Another important one, which for those who watch our videos will say, he's at it again, is the quality management. Whatever the business, it's not just in pharmaceuticals or in aeronautics, it's in food, it's in all sorts of areas, right? Quality has become a capacity bottleneck. Quality management as a whole has become a capacity bottleneck because people haven't realized that there's more and more work to be done to ensure the level of quality that is expected by your business, okay? More and more paperwork, more and more certifications, more proofs that are required. And you haven't upgraded your staffing enough, 1, and 2, of course, quality is not managed like the rest of the organization, so you hesitate to do diagnostics and try and improve performance, because if you try and put pressure on people who do testing in the quality department, right, and you say, okay, you're the bottleneck, you're testing 100 a day, you must test 200 a day, they're going to look at you as if you're the devil and say, I'm sorry, we have to do this seriously. It's not a question of how fast we do it. We must take our time. That's what we're here for. Okay, so it's hard to get performance, hard to even dare talk performance in the quality management area. Okay, and this is happening very, 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 very often. Okay, watch out. Quality management, it can often be a bottleneck. Okay. And another one is testing stages, especially if they are expensive. In a few businesses, the testing equipment is very expensive, and so you hesitate to buy enough, and it ends up being a bottleneck. Very dangerous place to have it for a number of reasons. 1, it's right often at the end, so the whole system gets clogged up with stuff waiting to be tested. 2, you're going to start hesitating to properly test your product, to test your competitor's product, to redo a test that's borderline, and so forth. Not healthy at all. Okay. So, step 2, you've identified your bottleneck. You want to exploit it. Okay, you're just, it's quite easy because once you've got it right, that's where you need to concentrate, and in concentrating on that area, you're going to be able to get very, very good results more or less immediately, right? You just go to that person or that office and watch what's happening, and you'll easily find ways to improve it, right? They are the constraint, and whatever it costs or whatever needs to be done will increase the performance of the whole company, right? And as you'll see in the examples, often it's just one person. So you visited a company with 500 people, you find it, there they are, they've got a big pile of work, and that person that is determining the future of the company, right? So number one, reduce multitasking. We won't have time, unfortunately, in this webinar to play the multitasking game that we regularly play with our prospects and clients. It's very silly. You have 4 tasks, the odd numbers, the letters of the alphabet, the even numbers, and write the critical chain. They do one after the other, they do it quickly, then they have to do the first letter, the first number, the first letter, and so they have to do it one after the other. They go mad, they take about 3 times more time, they make mistakes. That is how you're working. Okay, so you need to try and reduce multitasking. You'll never get it to 0. Okay, I'm not saying you eliminate multitasking, but we regularly find that people are multitasking just to the level of going mad. That's to say, at about 70 different tasks a day, about 5 to 7 minutes per task. Right? I mean, if they switched every 4 seconds, they would go mad, right? So they just take themselves to madness and live that way. And they just are slow, making mistakes, and not having a very good quality of life. Okay. If you have that, one of the solutions or one of the necessary conditions to reduce that multitasking is to reduce the level of work in progress, the number of projects in your organization. Okay. And you can do that 2 ways. Either you're courageous and you get rid of half your projects or 3/4 of your projects, say, no, we've got too many, let's throw all those out. I don't know many companies that can do that. So if you can't do that, we regularly use the 2-for-1 rule, nice and simple. Even your boss can understand it. For every, you're only allowed to launch 1 new project into your system when you have finished 2 projects. Okay, so you just break that big fight into lots of little pillowcase fights. I want this project, no, I want this one. But there's only 1 to be launched, and for every 2 projects that are finished, right? So little by little, the system purges. Okay, and of course, then, but have a look at the other videos on how you plan the critical chain way. You stagger projects. That's to say, you don't launch them all without thinking about the capacity of your bottleneck. You ensure that they're sent into the system. A bit like the rope, for those who know drum buffer rope, in a particular sequence, so that they arrive in a sequence fashion at the capacity constraint. Okay. And another thing that we highly recommend, it's quite simple. You'd find that all the time that is wasted by those people. Okay. What we usually do, because we're horrible consultants, is we do a day in the life of. Let's just say I will get one of my colleagues to watch somebody doing the work for a day and note down minute by minute, second by second, what they're doing. Okay, he's working on project A, he's working on project C, he's answering the phone, he's doing his emails, he's doing this, whatever. Okay, and then we analyze that data, and we can see how much of the time they were actually working value added for the projects and everything else they were doing. And spoiler for what's coming up, usually it's only about 30%, right? A person who is so-called dedicated to doing that task, when we look at what they actually do in the day, somehow 70% of other stuff has piled in, and so they're only actually doing the work 30% of the time. There's another reason why. It's quite easy to do a lot better than that. Okay, so the kicker there, I stand by. Okay, quite easy to quickly increase the throughput of the bottleneck by 2 or 3, a factor of 2 or 3, right? And this is happening with us, as you see with the examples and all the other stuff. You huge improvement in performance. Okay, just by applying those simple ideas. So you open up the bottleneck in such proportions that it moves to somewhere else, right? And so you'll be going through probably several loops quite quickly initially. Okay. Now, when does this stop, right? And this is the Marris consulting point of view, not necessarily repeated everywhere. It's not, for instance, in the 5 focusing steps, right? The 5 focusing steps is an infinite iteration. We think that is okay at the beginning, but very quickly you should stop and ask yourself, is this resource my best constraint or my least worst constraint? Shouldn't I keep this resource as the constraint and organize my company so that there are non-constraints before it and after it, right? What is the best constraint in my organization? Okay. And I won't have time to go into the details of how I got to that, but sitting on the top of a mountain for 6 months a few years ago, I came up with that definition of the best constraint, right? It is a resource that would take the most time or money to turn into a non-constraint, okay? And if I can put it in simple terms as an example for the project environment, the new product development example, or those key people, those people who accumulated 20 years of experience, who know more than your competitors about the products and stuff, they will take a lot of time, right, to replace, and maybe they're expensive, money too, but time, right? You can't just hire that person. So that maybe they were a good constraint to have, for instance. Okay. Anyway, that's a point I wanted to make. You will be doing your 1, 2, 5 iterations of eliminating the bad bottlenecks until you get to what could be a good bottleneck. Okay, and that's when you would stop what I'm describing and stop to think about how you're going to organize your company accordingly, right? Okay, if this is the constraint here in this department, I'm going to make sure that in my budgets and stuff, on purpose, I leave some sprint capacity before and after it, and I'm going to organize things accordingly. Okay, so that's the theory. Simple. I hope you agree. Very simple. So let's go through some examples. There are lots of others in the videos and stuff, so don't hesitate to hunt around for more stuff if you don't feel that the examples we've selected for today are pertinent to your environment. Okay. This is a world leader in luxury goods. It is the world leader in luxury goods, the largest organization in luxury goods in the world. Very successful, high growth, high margins. Most of you listening to me have got one of their things, and it costs you an arm and a leg. And so it was interesting because quite a few companies in certain sectors go through that transformation. They are over 100 years old, and in the old days, their constraint was in production, making the things. Okay, but in today's world, where they have to develop a lot of new products, excuse me, every year. Here there are about 900 new products a year. Okay, what used to be a factory producing things is now turning into a project factory, basically, right? The difficult part, the heart of the matter, is no longer the manufacturing. They've been doing that for 100 years. They know how to do it. They know how they've got all these artisans and stuff to make these beautiful things, right? But they want to make sure that the products are more or less unique. Okay, and so the shelf life of what they're doing is reducing, and so between that and the shows, and in this particular case, made to order, that's to say somebody would ask for a particular product and say, yes, but I want this particular color and I want this particular thing, whatever. Okay, and so it would be made specifically for them. That's the ultimate exclusivity, right? So as a result, in this particular organization, they realized that their bottleneck defining both the money they make now and the money they will be making in the future was in product development. Okay. So we walk around and 6 hours, I guess, so certainly the first day, just walking through the flow, trying to understand what the work they were doing. We found the bottleneck. Okay, it was the person who was typing in the technical specifications into the information system, into the ERP. Okay. What was happening is that new projects for new products were coming in from all over the place, from the artists designing for the next show, from manufacturing, because there's a process improvement, and also a significant quantity of these made-to-order orders. Right, so you would get an order that came from Hong Kong saying, "I want this thing but I wanted this particular green with that particular thing, whatever. Okay. And so that person would type in the specifications, would type in the bill of materials to do that. I need that bit of green cloth. I need that bit of wood. I need that, and I need that buckle and stuff. That was that person's job. One person in an organization of over 500 people. Okay. And when we visited them, they had a pile of paper about this high. Okay. And we did a quick calculation, and that was an over 4-month queue of work, right, using Little's law. So 4 months in an overall 15-month process, right? We'd found the bottleneck. Okay, and this was a person who had been there for over 20 years and was, loved her company and was the last person to complain and stuff. That's what I say. Watch out! All these quiet people who are not screaming and shouting that they're the bottleneck. Yeah, this was an example. And so we analyzed what their typical day was like. Okay, and sure enough, we got 30% of their time was spent doing that job, right? Typing in the technical specifications into the ERP, and there was all sorts of other stuff, right? That person having been there for 20 years, of course, stuff had piled up in the past. I also do this and I also do that, and often I get called up for this because I'm one of the few people who knows about that, and whatever. Okay, only 30% of the time I spent on that. Okay, so we did that. We also cleaned up the quality of information coming in to make sure that there was a full, perfect kit of information, because sometimes she would pick up a new file and she would look at it and say, no, I'm sorry, the way it's written, I'm not sure which green they mean. We have 7 different greens, and that just says light green when we have 7 different light greens. So I'm going to have to phone the person that's put this order in, and they're going to have to get back to the client and ask him more specifically which light green did they mean, right? So we made sure that the work was checked before it got to the bottleneck, so that there would be no loops like that one, and a number of other improvements that were possible. Okay, simple, because it was just, we were just in fact analyzing one person's work to see how we can improve it. Okay, and so in doing that, within the first week, we got the person to be doing twice as many within a week. Okay, and within a month, working on more complex issues, we got an extra 70%. Okay, so blasted away that constraint completely, and as a result, they resolved very quickly the queue of work in progress. Okay, it reduced by 77%. It didn't get to 0 because there was still some loops that were required, some of them unavoidable. Okay, and so once that happened, right, a huge increase in the volume of projects going through the whole organization. A second bottleneck turned up. Okay, and again, it was a regrettable one, right? It was purchasing, right? Purchasing all those components for new products, right? Not such an easy thing, not such an easy thing to try and estimate the workload, right? Because some of these new products were new materials, new shapes and whatever. So they had to find somebody who, in France, right, because this is happening in France, was capable of making that particular thing with that particular tolerance in that particular material, that particular color and stuff, right? They had to go out and find people who would make things that had never been ordered before. So it wasn't just a question of looking in a catalog and ordering. They had to go and discuss with various potential suppliers. Can you do this one? It's similar to what we used to ask you, but except it's smaller, or it's twisted, or it's this, and whatever, right? And that was the second bottleneck, right? We're still a long way from what would be reasonable. Would you not agree? So we did the same thing. We looked at how we could help them, and within 2 weeks, they were producing 60% more. Okay, and we went on. The third iteration, it turned out to be a very expensive machine in the system that was used for making prototypes and pre-series and stuff. A unique machine that could work with extraordinary tolerances, very flexible, and whatever. And there, the problem was a classic core conflict when you're in product development. That machine was used both for working on product development, prototypes and stuff, and used in production. Okay, and the reason it was the bottleneck, therefore, was because of the conflict between using that machine to make the month's order book, right, produce the stuff that they were going to sell immediately, or stop it and use it to do a prototype, which would define the sales in the future, right? So classic core conflict, making money now or making money in the future. Okay, and so we found a way of solving that, and that's now under control. Okay, so 100% plus 70% plus 60%, about 3.3 times more coming out of this organization of 500 people, right? And we just worked basically in at two people's desks, right? The whole of the rest of the organization could do 3 times more. That's what I mean, you know, in these environments, since the data is wrong about the workloads in various parts of the organization, we did this times 3 quite quickly. Case number 2, big, over 300,000 person multinational organization, okay, and this was one of its subsidiaries, 500 people. It makes big gearboxes, big, I mean, look at the size of these are the people, right, and that's the gearbox, the type of thing that goes between a turbine and a generator and a power station. But they get all sorts of these things. It's a lovely engineer's product, because the thing has to spin around at 10 to 15,000 RPM for 25 years without wearing down, without breaking up, whatever. So the whole thing floats on oil using the Bernoulli effect and stuff. Anyway, fantastic. Not you know, quite high tech stuff. And they designed them and they built them, so that the story begins where they knew that the constraint in the system was in their engineering, not in their factory. Okay, and so the bottleneck was quite simply, in this case, the design office, right? An open space of 15 people. And when you went into that open space, it was what, madness or normal, both. That's to say, people were shouting and screaming and typing and running and phoning and whatever. A lot of noise and a lot of excitement. Right, just normal. Okay. And the starting point is they had 90 of these things being designed. Okay, 90 designs in progress, and it took them 50 weeks to finish. Yes, 50 weeks to finish. That's right to the end. That's to say, the documentation that goes with the machine when they sold it and stuff, the certificates and things. Okay. And when they started this, they were finishing 1.8 designs or complete files every week. Okay, that's the starting point. Just the normal world in a large, successful company. These guys were one of the top 3 in the world in their business, very reputable, been around for a long time, just a nice, normal company. Okay, so what can I say? The various people doing the projects, they had about 10 projects each. Okay, they were being disturbed for a number of reasons, right? For instance, if they made a mistake, production would phone them up and say, you know, I'm trying to assemble that machine you designed 6 months ago, and I can't work out from your design where you want this and that. And that's cool. Okay. And of course, because they were delivering late, all the calls from the client saying, you know, where's my thing? You're late and whatever. And so just a lot of screaming. Priorities defined by the level of decibels, right? The louder you shouted, or the more important you were in the organization, got things done. But then who's more important, the guy in charge of Asia or the guy in charge of Europe and all that sort of stuff? I mean, lots of conflicting priorities. Okay, we did an analysis, and once again, 60 times a day, these people were switching. Okay, about 7 minutes per task, and the productivity reduced by 70 or even maybe 90%. Okay, and as I say, a lot of stupid quality issues also, right? Multitasking doesn't only slow people down, it makes people do mistakes. Okay, and typically what they were doing was mistakes in the bill of materials. So they designed these big complex things, and they'd forget something obvious like a cover on a box, or a piece of simple cable, or this or that, right? And so when production was assembling, right, just before the client was expecting to be delivered, the people doing the assembly would say, "I don't, you know, we can't do this. There's no cable here. You need to order it." Okay, and so that, you know, wasted everybody's time, got everybody excited, got everybody firefighting and all that sort of stuff. Multitasking kills. Okay, I can't say it enough. It kills work, the quality of life, it kills productivity, it kills the quality of the work done. So reduce it. You won't eliminate it. Reduce it, reduce it, reduce it. Okay. What happened? They had, as I say, 90 projects in the system here when we started. That's the number of projects in engineering. Okay. And quickly we got it down to 40, and right now they're back. They're down to, I can't remember, much less than that. They kept going. Right, this is in 2016. So how did we reduce it? We launched a thing called Stop, Starting, Start, Finishing, which you can understand from this graph here. The green stuff is the orders that they won, the new orders that the company won, okay, but which were not necessarily launched into the engineering department. This is the new orders, and therefore the new designs coming in. And in blue, these are the designs being finished by engineering, right? Blue is the output from engineering. We started here, and we implemented the rule, stop, starting, start, finishing. That's to say, we will not put any more work into the engineering department until the work in progress has been divided by 2. So we went from 90 to 45. It explains the steep slope, right? And because of that, they therefore concentrated on getting things finished, and they worked on all these projects which were already half done, 3/4 done, and whatever. And so during this purge, they were doing more than 8 projects finished per week, right? Multiplied by 4, right? Just during the purge, right? And then when we got to a level with half as much work in progress and better definition of priorities, more stable working conditions and stuff, they started churning out 4.2 projects per week, the same 15 people, right? That's 212%, I believe. Okay, increase in productivity and efficiency of those 15 people, just by going from a mad world to a normal world, really, when you think about it. Right? Exactly the same competencies, working on the same products. Went from 1.8 to 4.2, just by improving the way things were run in the office. Okay, so what other rules did we put in? We basically stopped people being able to phone directly the technicians. They had to go through somebody before they could interrupt the technician. And requests for modifications, whether they're coming from clients, from salespeople, from the factory and stuff, were first filtered by 2 coordinators before they were handed over to be done. Okay, and a project was not started until all data was available for kitting, especially with regards to data coming from the client via sales, because they were running late and panicked. They tended to try and design things when they hadn't got all the specifications from the client. Right, a classic, which obviously you don't do, but a lot of people do. So we got a single unified list of priorities so that people would stop discussing this subject, right? There were, I believe, 6 priority lists in the company when we started, so we went down to 1, and it was stable. And well, that gave those results. It crashed the lead times from 50 weeks to 8 weeks, okay, at the same time, right? So you're producing a lot more, much faster, and that's it. End of story. Okay, and have a look at the videos. There are lots more like that. Okay. So to conclude, the subject today was not critical chain, its setting up and its implementation. There are lots of stuff where you can see that. There's a webinar we did not long ago specifically on that. Okay, but what's interesting about today is that you don't have to do critical chain to do what I've just explained, right? You could just do that tomorrow, whether you might not like critical chain or you can't do it because your boss won't accept it or whatever. But what I've just described is basically common sense, empowered by the theory constraints. Okay, but you don't need anybody's permission to do this, right? And it's easy to do, win-win, fast. So that's why I was excited about doing this conference, right? When you open your eyes to this strange world of the theory constraints and bottlenecks in an environment where all the data is wrong, you find silly bottlenecks, you improve them, and you get some really, really strange, very quick results. That's all I'm talking about. Okay, and if you're interested, you could also do critical chain and go a lot further and finish all your projects on time, have great visibility, but that's not the subject of today, right? If you did implement critical chain, well, you can do madness such as these guys, Aerosuit in South Africa. Watch the video, another recent one when they go through all the details. They have new product development, that's a fever chart, and they finish everything on time. And you get all the other stuff like increases in productivity and much faster projects. Okay, over and above what I've already explained. As I conclude, I mentioned that in 3 weeks' time, on the 23rd and the 24th of November, there's a unique occasion. There's a conference being organized by the TOC-ICO, the Theory of Constraints International Certification Organization, the association that basically manages the Theory of Constraints community throughout the world. Okay. It's doing a 2-day conference specifically on critical chain called Critical Chain 2020, and it's free for the first 1,000 registrations. And I checked just before starting the webinar. There's still some spare seats, so I would recommend that you do it as soon as this webinar is over. It's organized by Ian Heptingstall, for those who know him, which is for me a good guarantee of a great event. Have a look at the program. I will be participating as a so-called expert, and some of our clients will be participating. You'll see another beautiful story that I love about critical chain, which is a guy who basically changed completely a factory, the layout in a factory, in 6.5 days. Indeed, organizing this conference enabled me to check up on how he's doing, and he's got another one where he's got his boss has said, okay, since you can go from 8 weeks to 6 days, the next one is to go from 30 months to 4 days. Anyway, and that's not going to be a horrible consultant telling you. It's going to be somebody in the aeronautics business, right? So maybe you'll believe him if you don't believe me. Okay, so go have a look at that conference. It's free. You can pick and choose the stuff you want, and I'm sure you'll find something of interest wherever you come from. Okay. Message from today. I hope if you're convinced by what I've said, you can start just after the conference, or maybe you'll wait until tomorrow morning, depending on where you are, where you live, and do it, because think about those strange results, right? It's weird. Okay, so that would be my concluding words. Thank you for participating. I hope you found it interesting. As I say, normally tomorrow morning you are going to double the performance of your organization, right, or triple it. I hope. And then I can't think of any possible good excuse of why you shouldn't do that. So have fun doing that, and maybe see you in another webinar soon. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.